From snow-bleached chili paste in Japan and cricket bats in India made of English willow, to Gamtae seaweed in South Korea and massive oak barrels in France, we travelled the world to uncover the stories behind some of the world's most expensive items. Our first stop is Annecy, France, where a watchmaker meticulously assembles Tourbillion watches. This spring is finer than a strand of human hair, and it's a vital part of the tourbillon mechanism found in the most expensive watches in the world. A collector bought this tourbillon watch for $5.8 million at a Christie's auction in 2023.
The complications in this watch is quite extraordinary, and this piece is $476,000.
The tourbillon mechanism was created to counter the effects of gravity on vertical pocket watches, making them more accurate. But it doesn't improve the performance of watches anymore. So what makes these watches so expensive? And why are customers paying a premium for a watch that doesn't perform any better? To answer that question, you have to understand what a tourbillon is. In a mechanical watch, there is a balance wheel attached to a coiled hairspring which allows it to twist back and forth. This movement causes another wheel, called an escape wheel, to advance tooth by tooth in regular intervals, creating the signature ticking sound you hear in a watch. In a tourbillon, however, this entire mechanism, called an escapement, is placed inside a metal cage, which is also constantly rotating. This additional rotation is what counteracted gravity's pull in pocket watches. These days, pocket watches have been replaced with modern wristwatches that primarily sit horizontally, so they don't require a tourbillon for accuracy. But for some reason, it's not only highly sought after, it's often featured prominently and can increase the cost of a watch significantly.
Because it's so incredibly difficult to master and make, it's going to add a significant cost to the watch. So you can see, a watch that's a simple time-only piece jump $20,000, $30,000, sometimes $100,000.
How difficult is it? Just ask Remy Coles, a 26-year-old independent watchmaker who specializes in all parts of the tourbillon making process.
Mon travail, c'est un peu chef d'orchestre. Je dois faire un peu tous les différents travaux que peut être un artisan et un chef d'entreprise.
His studio is located near Lake Annecy in France, about 30 miles from Geneva, the watch capital of the world, where top brands like Patek Philippe and Rolex are headquartered. He and his colleague, Clémence Thiriat, are in the process of creating Rémy's second collection of tourbillon watches, of 36 pieces he calls the Tourbillon Atelier.
Moi, ce que je trouve fascinant sur le tourbillon, c'est qu'on a vraiment cet esprit de mouvement dans la montre, le fait d'avoir comme un cœur qui bat au niveau du mouvement. Et c'est vraiment une complication qui est vivante.
It takes about a month to complete a watch from start to finish, so Remy and Clémence will be working on them for the next 3 years. One reason these watches cost so much is the sheer number of pieces needed for the tourbillon to function. The entire watch consists of about 200 parts in total, 50 of which make up the tourbillon, and each of these has to be extremely precise, down to the thousandth of a millimeter. Rémy's tourbillon is made from components cut from brass and steel. He sculpts the raw materials himself into the basic shapes using a CNC to cut the various pinions and wheels with precision.
Les mesures soient bonnes et là du coup c'est en train de commencer à usiner le composant.
While automated, machining all these tiny pieces takes a long time, about 15 to 20 minutes for each of the smaller parts and an hour plus for more complex ones. Rémy must then compare each individual component with the initial design on the computer to make sure it's exactly to the specifications and that nothing is outside of the lines.
Donc la pièce est bonne, il n'y a aucun problème.
For each piece, he has to readjust various settings, like the cutting speed, and this can sometimes take longer than the actual machining. The cut metal needs to be heat treated multiple times to reinforce it. First, this happens through a process called quenching, where the steel is heated up and then quickly cooled with charcoal powder.
Et du coup, toutes nos pièces sont trempées de cette manière-là, parce que là, c'est vraiment très très cassant, c'est comme du verre.
He then heats the piece again, tempering it, which changes the color from yellow to brown to blue. From here on out, it requires a careful eye and a steady hand. To craft this circular piece into a mechanical gear, he will then need to manually cut each of the 80 teeth into the base. Rémi will often stack 10 of them together to save time.
Donc voilà, on est une des dernières entreprises à tailler les roues avec cette méthode-là, dite taillage dent par dent traditionnel. On a des codes de plus ou moins 4-5 microns, donc du coup ce qui représente 1 micron, c'est 1 millième de millimètre. Donc là voilà, c'est un travail qui... Voilà, on est très peu de personnes maintenant à pouvoir faire ce travail.
Rémi and Clémence are both graduates of Lycée Edgar Faure in Morteau, France, a school renowned for training and passing on some of the best young watchmakers into the big-name Swiss watch companies.
J'y étais pendant 6 ans. C'est selon moi une des meilleures écoles d'horlogerie.
He worked briefly for Grubel Forsey in Switzerland before establishing his own brand in 2019, and Clémence worked at Patek Philippe before joining him. She is Rémi's first and only employee and has been with the company for about a year.
Mon arrière-grand-père était horloger. Mon grand-père m'en a beaucoup parlé quand j'étais petite. Depuis que j'ai l'âge de 13 ans, j'ai envie de faire ce métier.
Nowhere is all of this training, passion and attention to detail more apparent than in the stage known as chamfering.
C'est vraiment de l'artisanal, donc c'est là qu'on voit vraiment la présence de la main de l'horloger et de la main de l'artisan.
It's also one of the most time-consuming parts of the process, in which each edge is meticulously beveled, not only for aesthetics, but also to reduce friction and prevent any unintended resistance with the pieces.
L'anglage, c'est simplement en fait de venir casser les arêtes à 90 degrés avec un angle à 45, et c'est le plus difficile à réaliser parce que ça demande beaucoup de technique et de savoir-faire. Pour vous donner un titre d'exemple, pour finir une seule roue, on passe entre 7 et 8 heures. Pour une seule roue, pour une seule montre. Donc du coup, vu qu'il y a 3 roues par montre, ça fait beaucoup d'heures passées pour faire des finitions.
The chamfered component is polished and coated with metal, such as gold or rhodium, to prevent oxidation and add a colourful lustre, yellow, pink or grey, depending on the coating used.
C'est une opération qui est assez délicate et assez précise.
Rémi will first experiment with different test pieces to make sure the colours are just as desired. There are various types and styles of tourbillon, single axis, triple axis, and even flying tourbillon, which are only mounted on one side. Some cages make one full rotation every 60 seconds, as is the case with Rémi's watch. Some are slower and some are faster, but the faster the rotation, the more fragile the mechanism, which is already extremely fragile, especially when it comes to the hairspring. On any particular day, Clémence's tasks can differ. Today, she is assembling the pieces Rémi has already prepared into the tourbillon cage. First, she tests the balance of the balance wheel and then cuts the hairspring to the correct length to match it.
Voilà, la machine simule le mouvement d'oscillation d'alternance dans le balancier et du coup, elle va permettre de pouvoir définir la bonne longueur.
She wears an eyepiece, known as a loupe, to shape the curve and make a slight elevation of the outermost coil, known as the breguet overcoil.
Donc là, je viens d'assembler le spiral au balancier.
When it's just right, she will piece it all together in the cage, using a variety of small pliers and other specialized tools.
Alors là, je suis en train de visser les vis de la cage, donc ce qui ferme l'ensemble en fait. Donc là, mon spiral est mis en place dans la cage de tourbillon, dans la cage test. Donc voilà, comme on peut voir, il est libre. Il faut beaucoup de patience.
Mounting the tourbillon can take several days to get right. Remy will then check everything and place the movement in the platinum watch casing. They will do some final control tests and make sure it's tightly sealed and waterproof before scanning the watch one last time for any dust particles. So much time and effort go into making the tourbillon mechanism, and customers are willing to pay for it. But why, when it doesn't make watches more accurate?
Every time you pick up a timepiece, no matter what the price is, you're looking at a piece of art. Really, this is about buying what you love and buying what speaks to you.
The tourbillons are often even highlighted with a single sapphire crystal. At Watches of Switzerland, one of the largest luxury watch retailers in the world, customers can find tourbillon watches from most of the big names. But Kelly Yock, who has been in the industry for 28 years, says it's also her job to show collectors the broad range available from independent makers, whom they may not have even heard of yet.
It's up to us to educate the public when they walk through our doors on what other things they should have in their collection. I love anyone that takes the time to truly build an art piece like this from start to finish. I really believe if you love what you do, you're going to appreciate someone like Remy wholeheartedly.
Take this highly detailed Year of the Dragon themed tourbillon from Beauvais, for example. It is one of only 12 pieces new for 2024 that sells for around $500,000.
I think what's really important to showcase is the back of this watch as well, because you are truly looking at something that takes someone so many hours to do, and this is a true piece of art. Flipping that watch over and really looking at the artistry and how much work goes into decorating movement. It's extraordinary, and the geeky side of me, I would sit and probably stare at a tourbillon for hours on end.
If all goes according to plan, this wood will be cut, shaped, and scraped into one of the most expensive cricket bats. And while making a high-end bat is labor-intensive, the real reason they cost so much? English willow. English willow bats are considered the cream of the crop, associated with star players like India's Surya Kumar Yadav and MS Dhoni.
No professional player will use anything but English willow. The highest bats nowadays go for even up to $1,000.
That's why police in India have cracked down on counterfeiters trying to pass off bats made with less desirable wood. So why are English willow bats the top choice for pro cricketers? And why are they so expensive?
When we check the ping, see, you won't know in one day what the sound is. We have been working from like more than 25-30 years to understand the sound.
The bat he's holding is called the Gamtae. It's English willow and it costs around $1,000.
It is most expensive because of the quality of wood, the best quality selection of wood, the grains, the ping, the shape.
But developing the best quality wood takes a long time, and a lot can go wrong. The perfect tree for a cricket bat grows straight and slow, resulting in many grains close together in the wood. A tree that grows fast, on the other hand, will have fewer grains further apart. A bat made from wood that grows too fast will be lighter and softer, and it typically needs to be knocked in or played with a lot to harden it. The harder the bat, the further players can hit the ball. Most pro cricket players prefer tight-grained bats since more compact wood offers high performance from the start. The process begins halfway around the world, in a forest in England. Oliver Wright spends most of his time outside inspecting trees for J.S. Wright. The company supplies the wood for about 75% of the world's English willow cricket bats. An English willow tree is ready to be cut down when it reaches 60 inches in circumference, which takes an average of 15 years.
So roughly, if you were to hug the tree, if you can just about touch your fingers, depending on how long your arms are, then it's near enough ready.
Side shoots need to be trimmed twice a year to prevent knots from appearing in the wood. There's also the risk of a tree rotting from within if it gets too much water. And pests and diseases can ruin the bark.
But you can see how all the bark's coming off. Dead.
Once the trees reach the sawmill, the goal is to carve as many bats as possible from each one. This starts with cross-cutting the logs into 28-inch pieces with a chainsaw. Then splitting these pieces into smaller slices called clefts. Each cleft will become a cricket bat.
It all depends on how it looks inside the tree. If it's rotten, we'll get slightly less. If it's nice and clean, we'll get slightly more.
Average tree is about 40 bats per tree. The record here is about 700 out of one tree, and it was a huge tree. Yeah, huge tree.
Jeremy Ruggles is a director at J.S. Wright. He's been with the company since he was 18.
No, not very good at cricket, no. I love watching it, but I'm no good at playing it. You have to split them this way, so the grain goes through the bat to give it the strength. The grain can't go across the bat, it has to go from front to back, which is why it's split like cutting a cake.
At this stage, workers note any damage to the wood that might affect how it's graded later on.
So this is damage. This has been hit, struck by lightning or hit by something, hit by a tractor, or it stopped growing for a year, then started again. And you can see this is a good quality one. There's no damage or anything in it. It's a little bit of redwood, which is good.
One of the most important steps of the process is identifying what's known as the face of the cleft. This will be the part of the bat that strikes the ball, and the part the buyer focuses on in the shop.
Looking which is going to be the prettiest, which side has the least amount of colour, the straightest grain is what you want, less colour and no knots. So whichever side looks nicer, that is the side the face is made. Once the face is decided and sawn, you can't change your mind.
Both of the ends are then covered in a special petroleum-based wax.
It's about 10 millimetres on, just to reduce the splitting.
The quality of a cricket bat isn't based on just the type of wood, but also its grade. At J.S. Wright, grades range from 1 to 20, with 1 being the best. Bruce Arthey is doing the initial grading. He's been working with J.S. Wright for 48 years.
So this is how we grade things. We take the bat off there, we crush the back of it, we'd look at the grain of the bat like that, and these are quite nice straight grains. They're quite uniform. There's not much colour down the side, so I would put that into a 2 because it's just got a couple of little blemishes on the back like that, so that would make a 2, in my opinion.
The sorted clefts are stacked and dried in both the open air and a kiln to remove any moisture.
You can't rush this process. If you rush it, you get splits and you get heavy clefts. So this one in my left hand is a younger tree, but it's still beautiful, straight, no blemishes. One in my right hand's an older tree with more grains. This is what professional players like, the narrow grains, but it won't last as long as the younger tree with the wider grains.
JS Wright ships its processed and graded clefts all over the world. It's been supplying Serene Sports in India for about 50 years.
I've known Jatin Serene since he was a young lad. Hopefully I'll be dealing with his son one day.
Serene Sports makes 500 to 800 bats each day with the clefts it receives from JS Wright. One bat takes 24 to 36 hours from start to finish and will touch 8 or 9 different hands. The process starts with smoothing out the clefts and cutting them down to size. A V-shape is also cut into one end with a bandsaw. This is where the handle will go. While the base of the bat is made from English willow, the handle is made from cane that Serene Sports imports from Singapore. Each piece of cane has layers of rubber inside for shock absorption. The cane is smoothed down and then inserted into the V. Each handle is glued in place and it takes about 16 hours to dry. Workers use tools like a planer and an adze to carve the bat's basic shape and make it more lightweight. A cricket bat is flat on the face and curved at the back. It's typically thicker toward the centre or the sweet spot where it will make contact with the ball. The face of the bat also needs to be compressed since the English willow is so soft in its raw form. Each bat goes through a mechanical process like this one, which compacts and hardens the wood grain. Jeremy says this is one of the most important stages for ensuring the bat performs as expected.
If you didn't compress it at all, the ball would hardly go anywhere when you hit the ball with the bat. The face has to be compressed, and every bat maker does it their own way.
Finally, workers finish the handle by tightly winding a string around it and gluing a rubber grip on top. The bats are then sanded and polished.
In this section you can have a look. These are the ready finished bats. The bats are ready now to go.
High-end Serene Sports English willow bats can sell for over $1,000. And as with many other expensive products, fakes are a problem. Counterfeiters often use cheaper wood like Indian Kashmir willow and try to pass it off as English willow. Kashmir willow is heavier than English willow and typically more yellowish-brown in colour. But police in India have been cracking down on illicit operations involving counterfeit bats over the past few years.
There are many people who will sell a Kashmir willow bat with the English willow stickers. And then that's a totally criminal act what they are doing. They're trying to make fool of the customers.
Jatin says the best way to make sure you're getting a legit bat is by buying from a certified dealer. But despite the risk of fakes, Jatin says business is booming. And demand is increasing worldwide as cricket expands.
I've seen the cricket community grow in America. Now it's really starting to flourish.
Good start, good start.
It's a huge amateur community and now it's starting to get professionalized.
In 2024, the T20 Cricket World Cup is being played in the USA for the first time ever. And a new professional league called Major League Cricket held its first season in 2023. Sheikh has been playing cricket for 16 years, so he knows what the perfect bat looks and feels like.
Right now, people buy a lot of bats online, which is like going on a blind date. You really don't know what you're going to get, even though the brands try to promise a certain type of quality.
He says there are two ways to judge a bat: pick up and ping. Pick up is the feel of it in your hands and getting a sense of the weight.
You see, I'm constantly using my wrist and my forearm. So if a bat is too heavy or unbalanced, it just tires you out.
And then there's the ping test. The sound that Jardin was listening for, that most cricket pros know well.
A good English willow, when you hit it off the sweet spot, will make a beautiful sound. It's like that sound that you hear, that you know you hit the best part of the bat. Like, that's my sweet spot. That's why it's called the sweet spot.
But perhaps more than anything, cricket players look at aesthetics.
What makes a good bat, a high-grade English willow bat, is the cleanliness of it. There's no stains, it's just the lines are straight, especially in the sweet spot, so where the thickness of the bat is. You want the grain to be as clean as possible in that area.
But while these tightly grained, pricey English willow bats might be the most coveted by the pros, the trees that make these bats could soon be in short supply. According to Jeremy, quality trees are becoming rarer since they're growing faster with increasingly warm temperatures.
We're getting a longer growing season, so it's growing right up until probably November now. So it's growing more, so it's growing wider grains.
But he says wider grain bats aren't necessarily worse. They might just require a bit more use before they're on the same level of play.
You ask a player, he'll say, yes, the narrow grain one hits the ball better, but we've had tests done with bat makers making bats from wide grain. The ping is the same. It's all in the player's head.
Pulling these mossy green threads by hand is the only way to harvest Gamtae. And after hours of washing, shaping, and drying, they will be transformed into one of South Korea's rarest seaweeds. When Chu Hyun-sung started her business, Padasok, Gamtae was mainly harvested and eaten raw by locals in the Sosan region. But turning this small industry into a thriving business presented a challenge.
그때는 감태가 뭔지도 모르니까 고객분들이 감태를 구매를 할 생각을 아예 못 하셨던 거거든요.
So she worked to get this earthy and sweet seaweed to people outside the region. Not just to anyone, but to the culinary world's biggest players. All while navigating unpredictable harvests and rising prices.
제가 처음에 감태 시작했을 때는 감태가 예를 들어서 원물 자체가 1kg에 이건 예로 1kg에 10만 원이다. 즉 하면은 지금은 거의 1kg에 한 30만 원 정도 되거든요.
So how did Chu Hyun take Gamtae from local delicacy to worldwide sensation? And why is it so expensive?
10년 전만 해도 감태 하면 뭐야 도대체 사람들이 감퇴? 막 이렇게까지 심지어 얘기해가지고 제가 되게 좀 속상했었는데 이제는 이제 젊은 친구들도 감태 하면은 뭔가 고급 레스토랑에서 쓰이는 좀 비싼 거 이런 인지가 생기고.
But before reaching restaurant kitchens, Gamtae's journey starts on the freezing cold western shoreline of South Korea's Garorim Bay. Unlike other types of edible seaweed like nori that can be farmed, Gamtae can only grow in the wild on mudflats, coastal wetlands that form when ocean tides wash in sediment and mud.
그러니까 감태 같은 경우는 해조류인데도 불구하고 다른 해조류들은 이제 바닷물에 둥둥 떠서 있는데 지금 보시면 감태는 여기 이렇게 뿌리를 내리고 있는 게 잘 보이거든요. 그러니까 사실 해조류임에도 야채와 채소 같은 성격을 가지고 있는 굉장히 좀 독특한 해조류라고 보시면 됩니다.
Because of this, Gamtae can only be harvested by hand. Any other way could destroy the root of the plant, impacting the supply for next year.
채취를 할 때 뿌리는 내버려두고 중간에 끊어서 좀 채취를 해야 나중에 걔네들이 또 자라고 하는 과정들이 있거든요.
Since Gamtae can go bad if exposed to high temperatures for too long, harvesting happens from December to March, when the sea is the coldest. For these 4 months, Joo-hyun and her team must collect as much gamtae as possible to meet demand from buyers for the rest of the year. They can spend 6 hours a day pulling gamtae from the mudflats.
그러니까 추운 거랑 물에 잘 빠지는 거, 그 다음에 이렇게 쭈그려 앉다 보니까 정말 늘 이렇게 허리가 되게 아프더라고요. 작업하다 보니까. 손만 시려운 게 아니라 발도 시렸고, 그리고 지금은 안 그런데 정말 갯벌에 칼바람이 장난 아니거든요.
The intense harvesting process is only the first difference between gamtae and more common nori seaweed. Compared to nori's dark green colour and slightly coarse feel, gamtae's bright green, fine strands have a more delicate texture. This laborious process is just one of the reasons gamtae costs so much more than other seaweeds, and relying on the rhythms of nature means supply can be unpredictable.
이게 자연산이다 보니까 이게 안 나도 제가 할 수 있는 일은 없고 사실은 그렇거든요.
Recently, warming sea temperatures have disrupted the growth.
올해 같은 경우가 굉장히 어려웠는데 지금 좀 등섬 감태가 있잖아요. 그래서 올해는 수확량이 예전에 거의 3분의 1밖에 안 되는 것 같아요.
To make up the difference, Joo-hyun buys gamtae from local fishermen who collect it.
그래서 지금 저희가 뭐 감태 작업하시는 가구는 한 50가구 이상 같이 하고 있어요. 제가 나올 때 좀 매집을 많이 해두는 편입니다.
Gamtae also has a richer, more pungent flavor than nori.
감태가 굉장히 매력적인 게 되게 달달하면서도 좀 쌉스름한 향이 있거든요. 그래서 달달하면서 좀 쌉스름한 게 다른 해조류랑은 되게 좀 다른 특성이 있는 것 같아요.
But that flavor comes with a price tag. An 8-sheet pack of gamtae costs $16. 50 sheets of nori can be bought for the same price. But whether it's harvested by workers or locals, all the gamtae has to be washed back at the factory. It's the most crucial part of processing because any mud, debris, or critters left on the seaweed could affect how it tastes in the end.
그리고 얘는 이제 각각류의 새끼 같은 거예요. 사실 이게 자연산이다 보니까 이런 것들이 조금씩 있을 수가 있는데 이제 특히나 저희가 공급하고 있는 데가 뭐 파인다이닝이나 뭐 호텔이나 뭐 이런 뭐 백화점이나 이런 쪽이 되게 많은데 컴플레인이 걸리면 절대 안 되거든요.
Years ago, workers would have done this completely by hand, but this washing machine can clean 100 kilograms in less than 10 minutes. It's just one of the changes Joo-hyun made to the gamtae processing techniques she learned from her father.
그러니까 제가 이제 회사 생활을 접고 서산으로 내려와서 아버지한테 아빠 제가 감태를 만들어서 팔겠습니다라고 했을 때 아버지가 처음에 코웃음 치셨거든요.
Like many locals, Joo-hyun's father, Chol Soo-sung, grew up eating gamtae. But one day, he was struck with a new idea for processing it.
내가 이제 구워서 먹어보고 떠서 이제 보고 하니까 그때도 부가스도 있고 좋더라고. 그래서 그때부터 이제 감태를 시작을 한 거야. 이제 김같이 떠서.
Joo-hyun and her team of 15 still use his techniques to process gamtae at 바다숲.
그래서 아직도 저는 좀 어려워하고 지금도 아버지한테 틈틈이 배우고 있습니다.
Workers use a technique called harrowing to form the gamtae into paper-thin sheets. They submerge a handful of the seaweed in fresh water and mold it on top of a bamboo mat. While it may look simple, this technique can take 3 years to master.
사실 저도 몇 번 연습을 했는데 잘 안 되긴 하더라고요. 쉽지 않습니다, 이 작업이. 또 너무 두껍거나 너무 얇지도 않게 적당한 양을 잘 피는 게 되게 어렵더라고요. 우선은 여기 이제 빈 공간이 없는 거가 되게 중요하고 또 너무 이렇게 뭉쳐있지 않는 게 되게 중요하거든요.
Joo-hyun uses this press to remove excess water from the gamtae.
물이 좀 잘 빠져야 이제 건조가 좋아지니까 또 건조를 오래 하게 되면은 상품의 이제 색감이나 이렇게 질이 조금 떨어질 수 있어서.
The sheets dry the rest of the way in these dryers. 바다숲 sells gamtae sheets either raw or roasted at 230 degrees Celsius for 10 seconds.
구운 감태 같은 경우는 저희가 함초, 자염이랑 참기름, 옥배유 요 3가지를 뭐 같이 믹스해가지고 양념을 합니다.
Bada Soup produces 3,500 sheets of Gamtae in a single day and exports roughly 500,000 each year. But carving out a market for Gamtae outside of Sosan was anything but easy.
저는 저희가 공장을 만들고 감태를 맛있게 만들면 사람들이 알아서 찾아서 사줄 거라고 생각을 했거든요. 근데 제가 창업을 하고 2014년도에는 저희가 매출이 진짜 빵원이었어요.
Chu Hyun knew the only way to create a market for the seaweed was to teach people about it.
그래서 제가 그때부터 했던 게 감태가 뭔지 이걸 좀 알려야 되겠다라는 생각을 해서 감태가 무엇인가, 또 감태는 어떻게 먹으면 좋은가, 감태가 왜 귀한 음식인가, 좀 이런 것들을 알리는 데 많은 초점을 뒀습니다.
She focused on promoting it to the high-end market, sending samples of Gamtae to Michelin-starred chefs and writing articles describing its unique taste and texture. Eventually, her years of tireless promotion paid off. Chu Hyun says she began getting inquiries from chefs around the world.
그러다 보니까 한국에 대한 관심도 높아진 데다가 제가 만나본 셰프님들은 식재료에 대한 열망이 굉장히 크시더라고요. 특히나 처음 보는 식재료, 다른 사람들이 안 쓰는 식재료에 대한 열망이 굉장히 크셔가지고 감태를 소개해드렸을 때 셰프님들의 반응이 정말 눈이 반짝반짝 하시면서 이런 것도 있었냐라고 굉장히 좋아하시더라고요.
One of them is Chris Cipollone. He's the chef owner of the restaurant Francie in Brooklyn, New York. It's one of several Michelin-starred restaurants that sources Gamtae through Bada Soup.
It's got this robust aroma. It's like an oceanic white truffle, is what I always describe it to people.
Chris has been using Gamtae in his dishes for the last 10 years. It's a key ingredient in one of the restaurant's signature dishes, conchiglie.
Here we are in the kitchen. We're about to start making our actual pasta, the conchiglie itself, using the seaweed, and we have 4 simple ingredients. We have our semolina flour, we have the Gamtae itself, we have water, and we have salt. Very simple.
Chris mixes the seaweed into the pasta dough.
I felt like it seasoned the dough to a point where you actually tasted it through the pasta itself. It's got a lot of umami, a lot of pop.
The pasta is then cooked in a buttery wine sauce and topped with clams.
It's right on. Got tons of umami, bright, great mouthfeel, great texture.
While Chris could opt for cheaper types of seaweed, he says Gamtae's one-of-a-kind flavour is worth the price tag.
Anything's worth it in the pursuit of deliciousness.
And Chris isn't the only one willing to pay. Bada Soup provides Gamtae for high-end restaurants in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, as well as Belgium, France, and Germany. But this new demand has caused raw Gamtae prices to rise. Chu Hyun says since 2020, more producers have popped up.
지금은 감태하시는 분들도 조금씩 늘어나고 또 옛날만큼 많이 나지도 않은 경우들이 있어서 원물가가 굉장히 왔다 갔다 하는데 이거는 아마 다른 해조류들도 마찬가지일 거예요. 그래서 제가 처음에 감태 시작했을 때는 감태가 예를 들어서 원물 자체가 1kg에 이건 예로 1kg에 10만 원이다. 즉 하면은 지금은 거의 1kg에 한 30만 원 정도 되거든요.
But there is a silver lining. Chu Hyun says this new market for Gamtae is helping local communities in Sosan.
감태가 이제 많은 분들이 찾아주시고 또 저희도 수매를 많이 해주심으로 인해서 그 어가에서 겨울에 소득을 올릴 수 있는 큰 소득원이 됐습니다. 그동안 10년 넘는 시간 그리고 아버지의 30, 40년 넘는 시간이 그냥 헛되게 보낸 게 아니다라는 생각이 들더라고요.
내가 못한 것 제가 이제 열심히 하고 잘하고 있으니까 좀 마음이 뿌듯해요. 바라면 이제 우리 송 대표가 노력한 만큼 이제 국내도 그렇지만 이제 해외도 세계적으로 이제 뻗쳐서 이 브랜드를 제대로 만들어서 그러고 나갔으면 하는 것이 바람이고.
4 neat rows of red dots cover this remote, snow-covered area of Japan. Zoom in and you'll see they're actually chili peppers. This is snow bleaching. It's a major reason for Kanzuri chili paste's unique taste. After a 6-year-long process, this small bottle costs nearly $20, much more than the $3 price of mass-produced chili pastes, 7 times the size. But there's a problem on the horizon. Warmer winters have made it difficult to find enough snow, and the only company making the paste says it can't and won't skip this step, threatening the future of Kanzuri.
今回スキー場の方の敷地をお借りして、そちらの方で今日は雪さらしをする。ここからだいたい40分ぐらいですかね、道のりで。それくらいのところなんですけれども、もう仕方なくそちらまで行ってやるということです。
So does bleaching these peppers in snow really change the flavor? And is the struggle to find snow why Kanzuri chili paste is so expensive?
唐辛子ペーストですと、ただ単純に辛みがカツンときたりだとか、塩分がきたりとかっていうなんか単独の役割が口に広がったりとかするんですけども、それで広がり方もカツンとくる辛みとかではなく、優しい感じで広がっていくので、食材と合わせやすいところが他の調味料とは違うところだと思います。
That taste is, in large part, thanks to snow bleaching, according to the producer. Atsushi buys Kanzuri made by the only company in the world that produces it, Kanzuri Company, in Myoko, in Japan's Niigata prefecture. That's where Kanzuri originated.
通常はですね、会社の近くの土地で雪さらしを行うんですが、見ての通り雪が全くなくて、今日は雪さらしに行くんですけれども。
Snow bleaching is imperative to the final taste and quality, so Akihito is willing to go to great lengths to make it happen. Upon arriving at the ski resort, the team gets to work immediately. This is the nearest place Akihito could find that had at least 50 centimeters of accumulated snow. They first have to step on the snow to compact it, but it can't get thinner than 20 centimeters. This thick snow is essential. If the weather gets warmer before the chili peppers are ready, the compacted snow will ensure the peppers don't get mixed in with the soil below. Otherwise, they will be contaminated and unusable.
雪さらしっていう工程はもうどこの食品会社もやっていないそういった工程の一つでもありますので、これはKanzuriを作る上ではなくてはならない工程の一つになっています。
This net both reinforces the separation and guarantees no pepper is left behind when they're collected 3 or 4 days later. Today, the team is bleaching about 300 kilograms of chili peppers. They were pickled in salt from summer until the winter months.
唐辛子を一度塩漬けしたその塩抜きっていう効果もありますし、塩漬けしていた段階でまずアクはだいぶ抜けるんですけれども、中まで浸透していたアクを雪がスポンジの役目をして、中のそういったアク雑味も全部吸い取ってくれるっていうことで。
Workers snow bleach the peppers about 10 times a year and only in the winter months. This restricts production further and makes the final bottle of Kanzuri more expensive than mass-produced chili pastes. And producing the actual paste takes years. At Kanzuri's factory, Sato Kazushige is making a new batch from today's harvest. Kanzuri paste is made with 4 simple ingredients: snow-bleached chili peppers, yuzu, salt, and rice goji. To start, the bleached peppers are mixed with rice goji, rice inoculated with fungus that is usually fermented for about 2 days.
缶ずりに麹を入れることによって、発酵を促して、角の取れた、深みのあるうまさの、味に変化します。
The other important ingredient is freshly made yuzu paste. When all the ingredients are mixed in, Kazushige stores this fresh kanzuri in the warehouse. There, 600 tubs, each filled with 350 kilograms of paste, are aging. It must be aged for at least 3 years, and the most expensive kanzuri for 6. Many simpler chili pastes, on the other hand, are fermented for just 1 to 2 weeks. Locally, a small bottle of kanzuri paste aged for 3 years costs $6. 6-year aged paste costs $9. And exported, it's more than double the price. The aging process has a dramatic impact on the appearance and flavor.
缶ずりでこちらが1年発酵させたものになります。こちらが3年、こちらが6年発酵させた缶ずりになります。やっぱり1年目のものは、塩が立つっていうんですか、まだ缶ずりに馴染んでなくて、缶ずりと塩とそれぞれが際立つ、味になりますし、だんだん重ねていくとその塩味の角が取れて、芳醇なまろやかな辛さになって、発酵することによって旨味も増してきますので、やっぱりこちらへ熟成を重ねた方が塩もまろやかになり、味もコクのある辛さになってきます。
Kazushige has to check each container of kanzuri at specific times. Exactly 1 year after the kanzuri is made, it must be stirred to encourage the fermentation and to ensure it hasn't gone rancid. Otherwise, Kazushige has to discard the entire tub. Even the exact location where the kanzuri is stored can impact the success of the fermentation.
すべて同じようには混合するときにはしてるんですけども、色味だったり粘度でしたり、そういったものは微妙にやっぱり変わってきますね。
To balance all these variables and guarantee the quality of the final bottle, Kazushige checks the color against this chart. If the kanzuri is within range of these 6 shades, it's ready to sell. Apart from some mechanization, this process is true to the original kanzuri making method. Before Akihito's grandfather, Dojo Kuniji, started Kanzuri Company, each household made kanzuri its own way.
近所の方からいろいろ集まっていただいてですね、味を決めたんですね。その味を決める決め手となったのが、要はいろんなものを入れて複雑な味にするよりも、よりシンプルにして一番馴染みやすい、これぞ缶ずりっていう味を作るために、どんどん消去法で削っていって、そして最終的にはその唐辛子と米麹と柚子と食塩っていうこの4つだけの原材料になったということです。
And the once humble Myoko household condiment has reached international fame.
出身は新潟の上越市になりますね。子供の頃から慣れ親しんでいる食材でございます。まずはお刺身などにつけてそのまま食べることによってコクを与えたりだとか、旨味を変えてくれるもの。
However, when he uses it for meat dishes, it can reduce any unpleasant smells and an overly fatty taste.
そういう意味で私の中ではいろんな多様した料理に、いいところを生かすこともあれば悪いところを切ってくれる薬味ということで私の中では万能調味料というふうな位置づけにしております。
Only 200,000 tiny bottles of kanzuri are made every year. But today's struggle to find a deep enough snowy plain will likely continue to impact the next generation of kanzuri makers. In January and February 2024, Niigata Prefecture saw only 25 centimeters of snow, down from 93 centimeters in 2023. In 2020, hardly any snow fell, and snowfall over the last 7 decades has generally been on the decline. This fluctuation means Akihito can't rely on enough snow to bleach the peppers. Finding reliable land is a problem for producers of the most expensive foods all over the world. In Colombia, local producers of indigenous panela, a pricey, unrefined sugar, have moved to higher and higher altitudes to make the product. And that means they have to walk further to sell it. Droughts in Kashmir have left fields yielding significantly less saffron, the most expensive spice on the market. Fewer viable fields mean some producers are forced to sell their land. In Spain, warmer waters are pushing baby eel fishers to change shores more frequently so they can catch enough to sell.
Pues no va bien la cosa. Bueno, se está acercando la hora, ¿eh? Vamos a cambiar de playa.
So too in Niigata, where Akihito will have to continue searching for the right location, making production, and in turn the bottle of Kanzuri, more costly. However, he isn't giving up on snow bleaching, because it wouldn't be a traditional Niigata Kanzuri without it, especially since demand for the paste has grown 20% in the last 20 years. Finding enough snow is the first problem. Another is having enough peppers. Kanzuri is made from the local togarashi pepper. There were once 30 farmers supplying the company with these peppers. Now, Akihito says only 4 to 5 remain. He says the company may soon have to grow every pepper in-house. Importing them, although cheaper, is not an option for Akihito, who says Kanzuri wouldn't taste the same without togarashi peppers from this region.
で、味的にも身厚なので、辛みももちろんあるんですけれども、肉汁も多くて、甘辛で非常に食べやすい唐辛子に変わっていきました。うちで作った商品がこんなところまで、来て、人の手に渡ってですね、やっぱり自分たちもやっぱり感動しますし、それがもう誇りで仕事にも、力も入りますし、同じ新潟県人なんかもやっぱり、そういった私たちに、言葉をくれるっていうのはやはり感動して、この新潟妙高に、で作られた缶詰を誇りだというふうに感じているんだと思います。
Guide dog trainer Sean is training 18-month-old Emerson to disobey. Or, more specifically, when to disobey. When there's oncoming traffic, Tom taps Sean on the shoulder. Sean moves to cross the street. It's Emerson's job to disobey and guide Sean to stay put and stay safe. This is one of the most important tests for a future seeing eye dog. But it's just a sliver of how the organisation prepares its pups for the job. At the Seeing Eye, geneticists look at doggy DNA to breed pups with the best chance of becoming successful guide dogs. But it's not as simple as adopting a house pet. It costs the Seeing Eye about $75,000 to breed, train, and match each Seeing Eye dog. And about 40% of pups don't make it to the end of the program. No. So what makes a successful Seeing Eye dog? And why are they so expensive? The making of a Seeing Eye dog starts with breeding, requires multiple stages of training, and hinges on the bond between handler and guide dog. But getting to graduation takes over 2 years and a lot of effort. What Ivy is doing now, avoiding the train tracks despite Erin's command, is the most unique concept a Seeing Eye dog needs to understand: intelligent disobedience. Today, Erin Hensley, a Seeing Eye trainer, is using a railway platform in Morristown, New Jersey, to practice with guide dog in training, Ivy.
We were just working on what we call platform refusals. So we kind of encourage the dog to get close to the edge of the platform, and her job is to go anywhere but there.
Erin repeatedly leads Ivy to the edge of the train tracks.
So you saw in the beginning she kind of drifted whatever direction was opposite while still kind of keeping the same orientation. And then as I really pressured her to be like, no, I think we should turn left or turn right, to approach the edge of the platform, she started to get more insistent and even at times wanted to kind of show me the opposite edge, because this home won't kill me. That one will. So she was like, I'll show you the other side of the platform, but I'm not going to show you the side that's going to make us fall into the train tracks.
When Ivy does a good job, Erin reinforces her with plenty of praise and pets. Intelligent disobedience is absolutely essential for Ivy when navigating traffic, crowds, and any other obstacles a person may encounter.
And she did a great job. She's a very strong dog as far as platform refusals.
Ivy's skills come from a lifetime of preparation and training. Every seeing eye dog is born and bred at the organisation's breeding facility, specifically to help people with blindness and low vision. The building is purposefully separated from the rest of the campus to prevent illness among the approximately 500 puppies born there each year. Only about 200 of them will become seeing eye dogs or enter the breeding programme.
Those dogs need to be temperamentally suited to guide work. They have to enjoy and have an aptitude for what they do, but also they have to be healthy and hopefully long-lived.
Katie Evans is a canine geneticist. One of her main jobs is to understand the genetic potential of a dog before it's even conceived.
The two kind of conflicting slightly aspects of my role are trying to select for things that we want while trying to preserve genetic diversity.
Exclusively selecting for specific traits can quickly lead to inbreeding, so Katie uses ancestry tables that go back 95 years. This kind of selection tends to focus on the health of the dog, since personality-wise, seeing eye dogs can range widely.
One of the things we always say about guide dogs is that really there is no ideal guide dog. I think the only things that are really common to all of them is that they have to want to do the job and they have to be healthy.
This research allows the seeing eye to spot certain mutations that could disqualify a dog from the training. Progressive retinal atrophy, which causes a dog to slowly lose its vision, is now completely eradicated from the programme. Genetics is just one piece of the pie, however.
We're trying to produce dogs with the best genetic potential, but then we place them with puppy raisers and their role is to maximise the likelihood of them reaching their genetic potential.
Puppies start training to become seeing eye dogs the moment they come into the world.
Their socialization starts from day one.
Peggy Gibbon is Seeing Eye's Director of Canine Development.
So they're handled daily from the time they're born. The staff will handle their paws, handle their ears, cuddle a little bit with them.
These first few weeks are all about acclimating these brand new puppies to anything they might encounter in the outside world.
The staff who work with them will wear funny costumes so that they look a little different all the time, big sunglasses, big hats. There are also tapes that will play with sounds of thunderstorms, tea kettles, children, traffic.
Once the puppies are a bit more mobile, they're let loose in the puppy playroom. Yellow Labrador puppies chew on toys, roll through tunnels, and wag their tails. And while it looks chaotic on the surface, everything in the room has a purpose.
There are toys hanging from the ceiling so that the puppies are looking up, because overhead obstacles for them as they grow up are particularly challenging.
The inside of this building is all these puppies now for the first 7 weeks of their lives. The full cost of raising, training, and matching a seeing eye dog with a handler comes out to around $75,000. For context, a 2024 study put the average lifelong cost of owning a pet dog in the US anywhere from $19,893 to $55,132.
So the cost, if you look at it as for the life of a team, it makes it a little more understandable.
Funded solely through donations, the organisation creates about 260 partnerships a year. But these puppies are not quite there yet. At 7 to 8 weeks, pups like Zoe leave campus to live with a puppy raiser until they are about 2 years old. This gives these guide dogs in training their first taste of real-world experience. Puppy raisers are different from trainers. They're volunteers who bring these dogs into their homes to housebreak and expose them to all sorts of new experiences. Megan Wass will make sure Zoe, a 5-month-old Labrador Golden Retriever mix, learns the basics like sit, stay, and how to behave on a ferry. Megan and Zoe are attempting to board a ferry from Weehawken, New Jersey to New York City. It's an official Seeing Eye outing designed to expose the puppies to common experiences a handler might need their dog to guide them through. And while the main goal of today's adventure is getting used to riding a ferry, puppy raisers like Michelle Barlag treat each dog as an individual.
One of the things that we're going to be looking for today with Geppetto is that he can get really excited when he sees people, and it's really important for a guide to know that they cannot just jump on strangers and get distracted by people when they're working and on the job. And so he's learning that when he's wearing this vest, he is working.
Learning is the key word here, because the puppy phase can get a bit chaotic.
Mama's getting dizzy. No! Can you read the sign? What's that sign say? Please keep off the grass. Come on, you. Come on, Scully. Good boy, good boy.
But things like age-appropriate rowdiness aren't enough to disqualify puppies from becoming guide dogs.
As a puppy, he's going to have mistakes. He's probably going to get a little rambunctious at times, and we'll work with him on that. He'll get some commands to settle down. Our instructors are full-time paid staff who have received years of training in how to work with guide dogs. So there's a lot that they can do with the dog when it returns to the Seeing Eye.
Most puppies will get the chance to go on and work with the Seeing Eye's official trainers.
We say career change because often our dogs who don't make the program go on to other kinds of service careers. And we also recognize that even if their future is to become somebody's pet, that's also an important career too.
Puppy outings also give raisers the opportunity to assess how the dogs walk.
The pace at which they walk and the amount of pull they have when they get the harness on is unique to each dog. We want them to pull into the harness. That's really key to how they guide. So when they guide a person, they guide them by pulling.
Geppetto will live with Michelle until he's about 2 years old. Then he'll return to the Seeing Eye's campus for formal training.
It's difficult to say until he goes back and he really enters the training program if he will graduate, but I think he's going to make a wonderful guide dog.
More advanced training involves something called a blindfold walk. Sean McDonald, another Seeing Eye trainer, is walking around Morristown with his guide dog in training, 18-month-old Labrador, Emerson. Sean puts on a blindfold to get rid of any unconscious cues he might be giving Emerson as they walk.
Emerson, don't. Good boy.
Tom Pender, Sean's training manager, follows them to make sure they are safe and to help them test Emerson's ability to keep them out of traffic. When traffic is in front of them, Tom taps Sean on the shoulder. He wants Sean to move forward and he wants to see how Emerson reacts. But when Sean goes to walk into the street, Emerson disobeys, keeping his paws firmly on the ground. On these walks, Emerson is being tested on his ability to keep himself and his handler safe, his confidence, and his focus.
Were you concerned about the squirrels?
We were. Yeah, he did pretty darn good today. I definitely could feel his reaction a little bit, but the fact that he didn't really react and kept me safe the entire time was a good thing. Well done, Emerson. Oh, yeah.
Dogs who make it through training still need to be matched with their handler. First-time students stay on campus for about 25 days to meet, get to know, and learn how to work with their Seeing Eye dog. Room and board and even travel are part of the package.
I lived in Chicago at that time, and I was flown here and back. I was fed amazing food, given amazing instruction, that has served me well to this day.
Melissa Ullman is the Seeing Eyes Senior Advocacy and Government Relations Specialist, but she's also a former graduate.
So this is Luna. She is a yellow lab golden cross, and she is the best dog in the world.
But Luna wasn't the only one to receive training. Melissa stayed on campus for 3.5 weeks, making sure their personalities matched and to receive some instruction herself.
I had been used to traveling down a block with my cane, encountering objects because a cane is an obstacle detector and a dog is an obstacle avoider. You know, probably even in class, I was just getting a foretaste of how Luna would save my life so many times.
Of the $75,000 it takes to raise, train, and match a seeing eye dog, most graduates only pay about $150 out of pocket. Some pay even less.
She also came with equipment, right? Like a harness and a leash, and things that were very carefully crafted.
After she takes Luna home, Melissa is then responsible for the care and costs of raising her. But the Seeing Eye offers assistance to graduates for the rest of their dogs' careers.
So when I had a tricky intersection that I was dealing with a few weeks after I left the Seeing Eye, they came out to visit me and helped me with that intersection.
Kwon Hyuk-soo will spend hours sawing this natural red rock into the perfectly sized calligraphy inkstone.
그게 쉬시면 돼요.
He sells his smaller inkstones for $750, but larger ones can cost more than $2,200. Some professional calligraphers prefer grinding their ink on an inkstone, even though they could use more affordable liquid ink. So, what makes these inkstones so expensive, and why would calligraphers still use this ancient method?
이 소리를 들어보면은 이 약간 둔탁한 소리가 나거든요. 퍽퍽퍽 약간. 근데 지금 이거는 내가 캔돌인데 이거는 두들겨 보면은 이 맑은, 그래도 이거는 퍽퍽 소리가 이건 맑은 소리가 나죠. 이거는 좋은 돌이에요. 벼루로 쓸 수 딱 좋은 돌이에요.
The process of creating these expensive inkstones starts here, just 12 kilometers away from Hyuk-soo's workshop in Jincheon, South Korea. This is where he collects the red stone for his prized calligraphy inkstones.
아, 이거 돌은 좋은데 너무 커. 가져가고 싶은데.
Hyuk-soo avoids stones that have been exposed to air as they make for poor inkstones. It's important that the stone isn't cracked and the surface is as uniform as possible. The type of stone Hyuk-soo uses, Sangsan Jasok, is only available here. When he finds a stone that meets all of his qualifications and is easy enough to lift, he heads back to his workshop in Jincheon. Now, he can start the slow and grueling process of transforming it into a sellable inkstone. Hyuk-soo must first saw the stone into the size he desires. He does this the traditional way, no chainsaws or power tools, just physical force and a handsaw. To avoid injuring himself or damaging the stone, he secures it tightly.
고정시켜주는 거예요, 이렇게. 움직이지 않게.
It's too hard to do alone, so Hyuk-soo's friend assists.
스케치 살면서 그 형님이신데 제 일을 많이 도와주고 있죠.
They push and pull the saw until it's a little over an inch deep, where Hyuk-soo can begin to chip away at the parts he doesn't need. But manipulating this rock doesn't get any easier. Hyuk-soo's only tools are chisels, grinding stones, and brushes for dusting debris.
그럼 이걸 날을 또 세워줘야 되잖아요. 그 날을 세우려면 옛날에 낫도 그렇고 다 도구를 다 이 숫돌에 갈았잖아요. 이 숫돌에 갈아서 쓰는 거예요. 이 숫돌 처음 봐요?
네, 저는 처음 봐요.
아, 도시분이시구나. 시구나 이거 다 많이 썼어요.
He does every part of the process with his hands and shoulders. A beautiful inkstone is more valuable, so Hyuk-soo micromanages every step to make sure no flaws show up in the finished product. He flattens the bottom so it's perfectly level. Trying to fix it later will risk damaging the design he'll engrave into the other side. Most inkstones have three basic elements: a flat surface to rub the ink stick, a groove where the ink accumulates, and a border where artisans create designs. The flat grinding surface slopes into the collection pool, so the water and ground ink can flow easily. This shape is vital to the inkstone's functionality and value, so it must be perfected.
손 힘으로만 안 되니까 그 힘이 모자르니까 그 어깨로 밀어서 그 힘을 내는 거죠. 오래 하면은 괜찮아요. 굳은 살 들리고 하면은. 아, 어깨가 아무래도 뭐 벌겋게 그 멍도 들고 아프고 그랬죠.
After countless hours of chiseling and scraping, millimeter by millimeter, the surface is complete. Now it's time for the border. Today, Hyuk-soo is working on a relatively simple design, plum blossoms.
아, 이제 요런 꽃잎 같은데 그 꽃잎을 만들려면은 그 테두리가 얇은데 그런 데에 그 조심해서 다뤄야지 그렇지 않으면 아무래도 저 흠집이 생기죠.
He engraves every minute detail along the border. More intricate designs require more labour and time, so they're more expensive. But while the hardest part is done, Hyuk-soo says the inkstone is not yet worthy of a high price. That happens during polishing, which gives the inkstone its most important property, being smooth yet sharp. Hyuk-soo uses an abrasive stone and sandpaper to polish the inkstone. This creates an overall smooth look, but Hyuk-soo says the process also sharpens the outer layer of stone particles. That way, the stone can grind the ink stick into a fine powder.
그게 복막의 가장 별의 생명이죠.
The sharpness of the stone particles directly impacts how well the inkstone performs, and in turn, its final value.
이 사진이 20배 확대해서 본 사진인데 요 돌 그 입자가 여기 환하게 보이죠. 요게 이거 잘 서 있느냐 덜 서 있느냐에 따라서 벼루가 잘 갈리는 겁니다. 이 복막이 잘 서야 벼루가 잘 갈리고 그래 이게 복막이 안 서면은 먹이 안 갈립니다.
Once he's satisfied with the result, Hyuk-soo applies lacquer for protection and longevity. The inkstone is now ready for sale and use by calligraphers. Vincent Chong is a contemporary calligraphy artist. They use inkstones and inksticks for some of their work, even though liquid ink is popular with modern calligraphers due to its ease of use.
The first thing that I'd think of is either the sound or the smell of grinding ink.
Vincent says inkstones allow for a level of control that bottled ink can't offer.
So using an inkstone allows you to really tailor the quality of the ink to exactly what you want to do, and it also just seems to work out better always. And whatever additional stuff is in a bottle of ink just isn't quite as nice on the paper. I think at this point you can sort of see that the laborious quality of this process creates some energetic or psychological feeling of preciousness with this little bead of ink that you've worked so diligently to produce, which I guess just makes, just makes the experience feel more special.
While Vincent isn't in the position to buy a multi-$1,000 Inkstone at the moment, it's something they aspire to.
Yeah, I feel like it would give you this sort of energetic connection to another craftsperson, another artist. And in that regard, I think it just makes the experience a little more special, because so much care has been taken on the part of that artisan just so that you can have this really special experience of your own, in your own art practice, of your own sort of creative, generative kind of practice. I guess that's a little bit scary to use something that's so precious, but it's funny because we're talking so specifically about rocks, and stones have been just around for such a long time, and humans have had this sort of fascination with them for such a long time, that treating them preciously feels really natural. But at the same time, they have this life, and you should sort of allow them to engage with other parts of the physical world in a way that, gives them the generosity that they deserve, having been around so long.
Hyuk-soo similarly admires the preciousness of the stones. He appreciates the properties of Sangsan Jasok that make it invaluable to his work and craft.
이게 이제 물속에 있는 돌인데 이게 물속에서 건진 거지요. 이게 물에서 얼마 동안 있었는지를 모르잖아요. 한 달이 있었는지 1년이 있었는지. 보이시죠? 여기 지금 물기가 하나도 없잖아요. 이게 물을 절대 흡수를 안 한다는 거죠. 돌이. 상산 자석.
Sangsan Jasok inkstones were considered a luxury product during the Joseon dynasty, which began around 1400. But production died down during the Japanese colonization of Korea in the 1910s. But Hyuk-soo, a third-generation master and one of 4 remaining inkstone artisans in Korea, is putting it back on the map.
스승님께서 2000년도에 여기서 만드시다가 예주로 가시는 바람에 이 상산 자석이 없어지게 됐어요. 그때 생각에는 먹고 사는 데는 지장이 없겠구나 하는 생각에서 시작을 하게 된 거죠. 그러다가 이제 점점 사양길에 들고 그러다 보니까 이제 중간에 그만두게 됐던 거죠. 그래도 제 와이프가 생활 전선에 나서서 도와주는 바람에 이때까지 하게 된 거죠. 상산 자석이라는 유명한 돌이 참 이름이 없어진다는 것에 대해서 안타까웠는데 그래도 제가 이 맥을 잇고 있다는데 보람을 느끼고 있죠.
While much of the inkstone industry has been mechanized, Hyuk-soo believes the only way to keep Sangsan Jasok inkstones alive is by making them by hand. And for contemporary calligraphers like Vincent, this tradition is a constant source of inspiration as they make their own space in the long and continuing history of calligraphy.
Being able to reconnect with the brush marks and thus sort of like the bodily gestures of artists of the past, I think was restorative in a way that helped me feel connected to this artistic lineage and culture. Especially as queer and trans people, I feel like it feels so clear that our communities have been at the heart of artistic communities for all of like human history, whether or not we've been erased, whether or not our stories have been passed down. So being able to sort of access those artists who, maybe had, maybe were queer or trans, but we just don't have those stories today. I think being able to access their work through calligraphy was sort of one of the things that drew me to the practice.
These massive barrels will eventually be filled with thousands of liters of wine. But it's not just so winemakers can age more at once. Luxury wine producers, making some of the most expensive wine in the world, say these specific barrels, called foudres, impact the taste of their product, which is why they're willing to pay up to $50,000 for a single barrel. It's not only the size that impacts the taste. The real star is the wood, specifically French oak.
The French oak is the best of the world.
French oak is a heavily inspected and regulated resource, used only for the most precious projects, like repairing Notre Dame Cathedral. In fact, if the French government thinks a cooperage didn't bid enough for the wood, it reserves the right to block the sale. So do these massive barrels really impact the taste of wine? And why are foudres so expensive? While both American oak and French oak can be used to make a foudre, French oak is considered far superior, which explains why it's more than twice the cost. For one, it has a finer grain, with rings less than 2 millimeters apart. The slower the tree grows, the tighter the grain. France's limestone-based soil and cooler temperatures contribute to this slow process. This quality allows for a more gradual and controlled release of the oak compounds, or tannins, into the wine. Tannins create the subtle bitter flavor and texture you experience in a glass of dry wine, or when you bite into the rind of a fruit. Dominique Moreau of Foudrerie François comes from a family of wine connoisseurs, so he knows what wood makes a good wine.
Je suis également originaire du Val-de-Loire et fils de vignerons. Mes parents étaient viticulteurs, donc j'ai baigné dans les vignes et dans le monde du vin depuis.
Today he's inspecting French oak wood from his supplier Gaudelat.
On peut voir que le fil semble relativement droit, le grain est relativement serré, de l'ordre de 2-3 mm, donc c'est une belle pièce, une belle qualité de foudrerie pour nous.
This wood has already been dried for about 4 years. Once Dominique signs off, it will be transferred and stored outside the cooperage for a few more weeks before it's ready to be used. Wilfried is the gatekeeper, choosing which wood will be used for the base and keeping the most attractive pieces for the main body of the barrel.
C'est là où on place les morceaux de bois où il faut vraiment sur les gros contenants. Là, je sélectionne vraiment la crème de la crème.
In the end, only 20% of any given French oak tree will be deemed suitable to be part of a foudre. The discarded pieces will be used elsewhere, like fueling the fires for the toasting. The boards Wilfried has chosen are placed one at a time in this machine, which cuts and angles the sides and edges to various specifications based on the size of the barrel. This allows the boards to form a tube when they're arranged vertically. They're held together with cables to maintain their shape, while the entire barrel is steamed for several hours under a tarp to soften it.
Donc c'est toute cette phase d'étuve qui va se dérouler pendant la nuit, où un programme automatique va venir progressivement serrer, et à mesure que le contenant se chauffe, serrer le contenant de façon à plier les bois sans les casser.
After the heat treatment, the cable is removed and the coopers take turns hammering on large metal hoops to replace them and maintain the barrel's shape. They may also need to adjust the boards to make sure they're properly aligned and smooth.
Des fois, faut taper par dedans, des fois par dehors. Ça, après, c'est au feeling. Une fois qu'on est dessus, on le sent.
The amount of rings depends on the size of the foudre.
Le principe de la chauffe, c'est d'une part de marier les joints, de figer la forme du contenant, de les mouler, et ensuite de développer le potentiel aromatique éthanique du contenant qui va entrer en contact avec le vin par la suite.
But why use such a large barrel to age wine? First, it means the winemakers will need fewer barrels. But most importantly, it means the wine touches the surface area of the barrel less often. So the flavor the barrel adds to the wine is more subtle. These large filtres also minimize oxygen levels. While some oxygen is necessary for aging, too much can flatten the wine.
Certains cépages qui sont utilisés par les vignerons sont plus sensibles à l'oxygène que d'autres. Et donc, ramené au litre de vin, le foudre va apporter moins de micro-oxygénation qu'une barrique. On va beaucoup moins boiser ce vin. Et donc, on va être beaucoup plus respectueux du fruit originel, du raisin et du vin qui est élaboré.
Foudrerie François makes a number of different sized foudres, from 1,000 to 50,000 liters. It also makes egg or ovoid shapes, which are designed to help circulate the dead yeast cells and other sediment during fermentation. Such large barrels need to be moved with forklifts and accessed using ladders and scaffolding. The next step is toasting, in which kilns are lowered into the open barrels. They're monitored closely because the barrel could blister or blacken at this stage, meaning all the work to build the massive foudre could go to waste.
Alors on peut sentir l'odeur, voilà, l'odeur du bois qui se dégage, c'est vraiment très très spécifique et c'est tout l'art du foudrier. Ça nécessite vraiment un savoir-faire spécifique et particulier que seules quelques personnes de l'atelier peuvent maîtriser et maîtrisent.
Toasting brings out more of the tannic flavors, and customers can specify the level.
Plus on chauffe, plus on va aller sur des notes grillées, toastées, de type café, de type chocolat. Et moins on chauffe, plus on garde le côté frais et plus on est respectueux du profil aromatique d'origine du vin.
The bottom pieces are created by attaching smaller boards with wooden dowels. Strips of wood are also added in between them to make sure it's an airtight, waterproof fit. And a groove is cut along the outside edge so that it will fit securely into the bottom and act as a seal. At this point, any accessories are added, like the tasting tap or special thermometers. Since Foudrerie François customizes its foudres for its clients, each barrel is built to their specifications.
Ici, le client nous a demandé d'intégrer un système de thermorégulation pour maîtriser la température du vin qui sera élevé dans ce foudre. Et donc, il souhaite avoir un thermomètre pour pouvoir vérifier, contrôler cette température qu'on n'a pas sur cette autre foudre parce que le client ne l'a pas souhaité.
Logos of the winery brands are also chiseled into the wood. The containers are finally packaged and shipped to their final destination. Foudrerie François has customers all over the world.
Aujourd'hui, on vend principalement en France, en Espagne, aux États-Unis, en Italie, en Australie, en Afrique du Sud. On vend également au Chili, en Argentine.
Typically, only high-end wineries use French oak barrels, which are more expensive than American oak. They start at about 8,000 euros for a 1,000-liter foudre. A standard 225-liter French oak barrel sells for about 900 euros, and a similar one made of American oak is about half the cost at 470 euros. This ultimately increases the cost of the wine as well. If an installation is outside of France, the price goes up even higher and could be as much as 45,000 euros. While the oak flavor will start to fade over time, the foutres can still be used to ferment for decades.
Malgré tout, les contenants restent dans les caves, ils peuvent rester une génération, c'est-à-dire 30-40 ans.
Each barrel from Fruiterie François is also marked with a small plaque for transparency.
Donc on retrouve notre plaquette qui nous permet d'identifier le plot, l'arbre, la forêt d'origine et sa date de sciage et sa date d'abattage de façon à garantir une traçabilité totale à nos clients tout au long du processus de transformation.
Traceability is important because quality oak trees are a limited resource. They take over 120 years to mature, so the person who planted the seed won't even be allowed to see the foutre or taste the wine. It's March in the Loire Valley of central France, and a new batch of logs has just arrived at the Gueux de la sawmill. The company specializes in processing and supplying locally sourced oak to some of the top cooperages in the country, including Fruiterie François.
On achète plutôt dans les bois haut de gamme et ce genre de bois-là représente 6 à 7% maximum de nos achats.
There's an initial quality check upon arrival, one of many in the road to becoming a foutre.
Donc la sélection dépend du diamètre, de la rectitude, de la qualité du bois.
A worker will measure out the desired length and make note of any initial knots or imperfections in the wood, which would cause a leak in the final barrel. The logs are sorted and lifted onto a conveyor, where a machine removes the bark. Each log is then cut into a pile known as a boule, using vertical cuts in the same direction as the fibers. Then they're unstacked and re-examined. The ideal pieces have very straight fibers.
Alors donc cette machine nous permet de dépiler les plateaux un par un pour vérifier la qualité de chacun, voir si cela correspond bien aux attentes de nos clients.
Quality tight-grain wood is a treasured resource for cooperages, so the Office National des Forêts, or ONF, holds auctions for plots of trees every fall. In 2022, 44,000 cubic meters of wood were sold to a variety of cooperages for a record 15 million euros.
Et si jamais l'État estime que la valeur mise dans les enveloppes n'est pas à la hauteur de leur expertise, ils ne sont pas obligés de vendre cette parcelle l'année où ils ont décidé. Les bois ne sont pas coupés.
The boules are placed outside to be air-dried for up to 4 years before they're delivered to a buyer.
Donc ceux-là, c'est des bois de 2 ans de sciage qui commencent à être un petit peu noircis par l'oxydation.
Drying reduces moisture, which can warp the wood, and helps strengthen it for use in a foutre.
Donc le chêne français est quelque chose, est une essence, malgré son volume présent, c'est une essence rare.
Since World War II, the French government has been carefully managing their growth and distribution. It maintains some plots of only the straightest trees with the finest grains, regularly clearing out any weak outliers. The ONF also established a system called mosaic forest to battle the climate crisis. This involves planting a mixture of species to nurture the growth of the more valuable oak trees. These methods seem to be working for now. France's forests have been growing at a rate of 85,000 hectares per year, according to the ONF. But the Ministry of Agriculture released a report in 2023 calling for billions of euros to help combat extreme heat and drought, which it says could eliminate 30% of tree species in France by 2050.
C'est quelque chose qui met très longtemps à pousser et qui est en cours de raréfaction, ne serait-ce que par les surfaces exploitées et par le changement climatique qui fait que beaucoup d'arbres meurent aujourd'hui.
This 70-year-old company hauls in £140,000 of forest-grown Shiitake a year. It starts here. in the forests of the Japanese prefecture of Miyazaki. Farmers use a 1,000-year-old technique to grow the rarest of them all, white flower. Sugimoto Shiitake sells these premium caps for at least $400 per kilo. But the company says less than 1% of the mushrooms it processes are given that top-tier designation. Forest-grown shiitakes are getting harder to cultivate, and the conditions needed to produce the white flower variety are so specific that even a few drops of rain can ruin them. On top of that, the appetite for all kinds of shiitakes is decreasing in Japan, where they've historically been a staple. That's why Sugimoto and other Japanese companies are increasingly turning to a global market to future-proof their business. So what makes these forest-grown mushrooms so expensive? And can this rare Japanese shiitake make a comeback?
まず、木にドリルで穴を開けます。そしてそこにこの椎茸の菌が、入ったプラグ、これを穴に入れて、約2年。
This process is known as inoculation. And at this stage, there's no telling which sprouts will become white flower shiitake.
そして2年経ったら椎茸が毎年春と秋、生えてくるようになります。
That's how long it takes for the fungus to spread throughout the log and start sprouting harvestable caps. Each log produces mushrooms for about 6 years.
すべての栄養を吸ってしまいました。なので、あとはもうこういうふうにボロボロと、土に帰っていくだけです。
原料を他から探してくるんじゃなくて、やっぱ自分の近くの家の近くからずっとローテーションしながらずっとこの栽培を続けていっている。
This species of tree is not only plentiful, but apparently delicious.
で特にそのクヌギの木っていうのは甘い、樹液を持っているので、非常にそのなんて言うんでしょう、味わいが良くて、しかも歯ごたえのある椎茸が作れる木です。
Forest-grown mushrooms are at the top of the shiitake hierarchy. They are more difficult and unpredictable to produce than indoor-grown, which leads to their heftier price tag. Even in the US, the price of forest-grown shiitakes can reach $40 per kilo, while the price of indoor-grown greenhouse shiitakes is only half of that.
小というおかくずで作るやつはやはり味もなければ香りもない。そういった形から言えば原木椎茸というのは出汁も取れますし、香りもいいし、食感もいいし、食べて美味しいというのが。
Then there are the two main types of shiitake based on their shape.
一つはドンコ。ドンコは実が厚くて、縁がしっかり巻いていて、6割で、それから硬芯。硬芯は非常に薄くて。
The top tier version of donko is called hanadonko or white flower. That's the one that fetches that $400 per kilo price tag.
普通の椎茸が柔らかいと、柔らかいとすれば天白はコリコリした食感になりますので、全然食べる感覚が変わってきます。
The difference between a regular donko and a white flower shiitake comes down to the cap. All donko mushrooms will have distinct cracks, but the pattern on a white flower is more dispersed, like this. But to grow any shiitake this way, conditions have to be perfect.
シーズンが来ても雨が少なかったら芽が出ないとか、寒かったら大きくならないとか、雨が降ると大きくなりすぎるとか、いろんなところを気に使いながら。
And white flower caps can't be directly rained on at all. When water gets into those cracks on the surface, it discolors the mushrooms and decreases their value.
だけどこの木の影になっているところ、雨が当たらないところに、いいものが生えていることが多いです。
When they're ready, workers like Naoko Kai harvest each one by hand. Traditionally, logs are left unprotected in the forest. But growers like Guy Husao started growing mushrooms in an outdoor structure he calls an artificial log yard to gain some control over his environment.
瓶を張って雨が降らないようにするし、雨が少ないとこのスプリンクラーで水を必要な水分を与えて、強制的に椎茸を発生させる、そういう施設です。
Even with this limited control, the recent unpredictable climate is affecting how much he can harvest. In 2010, Guy Husao left his life in Osaka to join his father on this Shiitake mushroom farm.
私の父親が10万から15万の間でずっとやってたんですが、私が帰ってきた時人数も多いし、ということで倍にしましてね、30万個ぐらいを。
But a combination of his parents' aging and an increasingly unpredictable climate caused the farm's productivity to shrink again.
で今現在は10万から15万の間でまた父がやってた頃の量で今やってる時代ですね。だから稼ぐのはやっぱりなかなかこの気候の変動が大きくて昔みたいにやっぱりできないっていうのが最近の状態です。本当に季節が読めない状態になってきてますので地球温暖化がもういいし。
A smaller yield means fewer white flower shiitakes, which only make up about 8% of Husao's harvest.
キノコはどれでもじゃあ天白になるのかってなかなか難しい。
White flower, regular donko, and goshin mushrooms are harvested all at once, loaded up in crates or bags, and taken to Sugimoto's processing facility to be sorted, dried, and packaged.
で機械でサイズを分けた後も下の階にある遠赤外線乾燥炉というところで椎茸の水分をコントロール。
Drying shiitakes this way actually amplifies their umami flavor. Dehydration breaks down the cell walls of the mushroom, releasing and concentrating the compounds responsible for their taste. All that flavor remains even after they're rehydrated.
なのでもちろんフレッシュで食べても美味しいんですけど、フレッシュな花どんことその乾燥した花どんこっていうのはおそらく食べ比べるとこんなにも違うのかと驚くと思う。
After the drying process, workers like Eddie Hoshi will hand sort the shiitakes by color, shape, and size. This is where she'll be able to separate the white flower from the rest of the donko.
はい。普通のどんこと違って普通のどんこはこちらなんですけど、こちらは模様があるんですけど、花どんこは天白どんこは、このようにこの白の割合が多いものを選んで、おさの色と縁の巻きとあと大きさで選んでます。どんこでも、模様があって天白でも中のおさの色が悪かったり、こういうふうに縁がしっかり巻いているものじゃないと、どんこにはならないので、それだけ貴重な、花どんこ、天白どんこになります。
White flower mushrooms must be flawless. And Sugimoto is picky about the other types of shiitake the company processes too. Sorters will filter out any mushrooms that have aesthetic flaws.
ここでこういうふうにちょっと色が悪いもの、それから、割れてしまっているもの、そういったものをここで、取り除いていきます。
These mushrooms will be used in other products like the company's shiitake powder. It's used by chefs all over the world as a natural umami booster.
広まってますよね、実際ね。椎茸の戻し方、食べ方を知らないというのがもう根本的になって、若い人がちょっと椎茸離れ。
Even though demand is slowing in Japan, the global appetite for mushrooms is steadily growing. And shiitakes in particular are sought after for their perceived health benefits. So, Sugimoto has been increasingly tapping into international markets.
ですので今後この需要が伸びるかというとそこはちょっと非常に難しいんですけど、ただ日本ではそうですけど、香港それから台湾ですとその花どんこっていうのはものすごく昔今も
ね、そこでやっぱ海外の方にこういうパイプをつないでいただいて、安定 きく価格も安定してきたということで非常に助かっている状態ですね。今とそのやる気が起きているという状態ですかね、今のところ。
According to the Mushroom Council, over the past decade in the US, there's been a more than 100% increase in specialty mushroom sales, primarily driven by Shiitake.
They're so versatile, they're just so amazing, and you can do so much with them.
Ravi De Rossi is the co-owner of Third Kingdom, a mushroom-centric restaurant in New York City. Most of its mushrooms are sourced locally, but white flower calls for special circumstances.
We get it flown in from Japan, and when they have them, they'll ship us a few. We'll run it as a special. We'll invite just like some of our special regular customers and let them know what we're doing.
Regular donko also shows up on the menu from time to time. Executive chef Juan Pajarito dreams up the dishes like this one, prepared steak and onion style.
Diría que un tipo de artista, jugar con los hongos.
While donko shiitakes are in season, he'll reach for them over thin Caucasian ones when he wants an amplified experience.
Un shiitake normal, sí. Vemos la diferencia de carnosidad que tiene ese hongo. White flower shiitake mushroom es un poco, como digo, más carnoso. El sabor es más intenso, más fuerte al shiitake regular. Esa es la diferencia, pero le digo, el umami que tiene es algo muy diferente al regular shiitake.
So leaning into the international market is key for companies like Sugimoto.
出たっていうのはがスタートですけど、今僕らが海外にその原木栽培の椎茸を紹介してすごく強く感じているのは、絶対に真似されないというすごい強みを持っている。
It takes 20 people to build this 6-foot-tall instrument. Across 4 months, artisans pull, screw, and twist together thousands of parts. And buying a pedal harp is no minor decision. Professional models can cost $70,000, over 10 times what some smaller harps without pedal mechanisms cost.
There are finance options, just like you're buying a car.
Prying open a pedal harp reveals the complex mechanisms that enable its versatility. So, what can this massive pedal harp do that other harps can't? And what makes it one of the most expensive instruments on stage? We enlisted the help of Brandy Younger, a Grammy-nominated artist, to explain the complexity of the pedal harp.
Right? The glissando. That's what harps are probably most known for. But we're the only ones that can do that. So that makes us special.
When you watch a harpist, you probably notice their hands, but you might not notice their feet. Harpists change the pitch by stepping on these pedals, allowing them to play freely in any key. On lever harps, mechanically simpler cousins of pedal harps, musicians must reach up to set the key by hand.
You do really need to be really quick with your hand so that you can continue to play and then change the pitch in the middle of a song. There's a lot of repertoire that you can only play on pedal harp and cannot play on lever harp.
But this convenience comes at a steep cost. The fact that each harp is handmade is a big part of why they're so expensive. Beginner models start at about $14,000, but prices can exceed $70,000. And the expenses don't stop once you buy the harp.
Harp maintenance is a thing. And when you have 3 harps like me, it's a thing you cry about. You have to buy a cover. We're talking $750, maybe $900 for the full cover. And then a dolly. A lot of us have what they call the Rolls Royce of harp dollies, and that's $1,000 American dollars. $500 for strings, $300 to $400 for a regulation without anything wrong, right? Because just like a car, it's quite an expensive profession.
One of Brandy's harps was custom made by Kamak. a company that's been building harps in France for over 50 years. And many of its artisans have worked here their whole career. Inside, pedal harps are deceptively complex. Artisans install about 2,000 parts by hand, making adjustments 1 millimeter at a time. These metal arms are part of the mechanism. Artisans build everything before tucking it all into the neck of the harp. Each tiny component needs to move consistently without missing a beat.
When I move a pedal, these little parts will turn and shorten the strings by this distance, which corresponds to a semitone.
Artisans attach the pedals to internal rods connected to the neck. When a harpist moves a pedal, the mechanism inside twists these forks, changing the length of all the strings of that note and the pitch.
So we have 7 pedals for each note of the scale. This is C natural. I move it down to make it sharp, and then I move it all the way up to make it flat.
When a harpist plucks a string, it vibrates off the massive soundboard. Much of the wood on a pedal harp is ornamental, but the soundboard has specific requirements.
The main wood we use are not the most expensive part of the harps. It's only the spruce, because this is the wood which will produce the tone of the harp. So it comes from a very specific place in the Alps. The grain of the soundboard must be absolutely parallel and perpendicular to the direction of the strings. This is really the heart of the sound.
Because of minor differences in the wood, no two harps, even from the same company, sound exactly the same.
The sound of the harp is in fact connected to the quality of the wood of the soundboard. But the volume of the harp is made by the sound box, which is this volume at the back of the soundboard which will amplify the vibration.
We play with the harp leaned on our shoulders so we can feel the vibration. I can really take a moment and just listen to the music and also physically feel the vibration through my body.
Now artisans get to work cutting, sculpting, and sanding each piece. Kamak makes about 300 pedal harps each year. And while the tools are modern, Jacques says harp making is largely the same as it was 200 years ago. One of the most striking pieces is the column. Artisans fill every inch with ornate carving. But it'll take a week to finish this design.
C'est indiqué ici. Je commence toujours par faire un dessin. Ensuite, avec mes outils, là, qui sont des gouges, je fais du frappage. Ce qu'on appelle du frappage, c'est-à-dire en frappant.
Jean-Bernard has been carving since he was 14. Most designs he recreates from memory.
Tous les bois ont des défauts et tous les bois ont des qualités. Certains sont plus durs, certains sont plus tendres, et je les aime tous. Je les aime tous.
At the other end of the workshop, artisans coil each of the 47 strings up to the neck. The middle strings are made from animal gut, while the outer ones use nylon and steel. Gut strings produce a warm sound, but are less durable than nylon. Durability is important because a full set costs $500 to $800. Typically, harps need a new set of strings once a year. But making the individual parts is only half the battle. Now it's time to put it all together. After 23 years at Camac, Guillaume is an expert at visualizing a finished harp from the separate pieces. And workers actually put it together twice. First to fit all of the parts together, then again after workers varnished the wood.
Donc on apprend vraiment ici voilà, tout le montage, l'ajustage, ça se passe vraiment, on apprend sur le tas. Chaque harpe a vraiment son ajustage particulier, quoi. Si je reprenais cette pièce-là, elle n'irait pas forcément sur une autre canopée.
Most of the artisans in our company has spent their whole life here. It's really in the hands of our workers. Every time one worker leaves, we lose some knowledge.
Pedal harps are much more expensive than their simpler cousins, lever harps, which cost $2,000 to $9,000. Camac makes about 2,000 lever harps a year. This type of harp is what new players usually learn on.
This I got from my very first teacher. When a student is ready to move from a lever harp to a pedal harp, and I have to have a conversation with their parents, because it doesn't mean just buying something that costs a car. It often means that they have to also buy a new car that can fit the harp inside of it. They both come with their sets of challenges, and there are some incredible lever harpists out there, but I have an easier time on the pedal harp.
For musicians, it's important to have a harp that represents them aesthetically as well as musically.
So this is one of my babies. I have 3 main babies. This is a Camac, and the model is, it's a big blue, but it is custom. I call it champagne. Champagne and ebony. There's a pickup on every string. And so I use this harp, especially when I'm performing with my trio or larger groups.
For acoustic performances, Brandy uses her Lion and Healy harp.
Growing up, I always wanted to play music that I heard on the radio. Today, we see it most often in orchestras. But I always did sort of go off the beaten path and had sort of a double life, maybe a triple life. Part of the life was in orchestra, part of it was recording on hip-hop recording sessions, and then part of it was playing at jazz clubs. I think the harp shines in all genres because I really do think that there's sonically room for it in way more styles of music than people are used to hearing. It's not only possible to play the instrument and to take ownership of the instrument, but to take it outside of where it's completely respected and completely expected, and to do something with it confidently and seriously.
Cement tiles start out like cake batter. For artisans to complete the transformation, they must bury their art in cement. Nearly 200 years ago, cement tiles were popular because they were affordable. But today, the price for their main ingredient has skyrocketed, aggravated by supply chain issues and shortages. Cement tiles can cost $30 per square foot, over 10 times what some ceramic subway tiles cost. But despite the premium, their popularity across the globe has only increased. Even while many workshops are struggling to stay in business. So what's made cement tiles so expensive? And can new trends sustain this traditional craft? Every morning at this workshop in Morocco, artisans settle in, surrounded by tiles. The craft is still manual. Each tile is touched by human hands.
الحرفة بالنسبة لي أنا هي فن، ما كنعتبرهاش أنا حرفة، لأنه ملي كتعمق في الأشكال ديالها وفي الألوان ديالها وتبحث فيها مزيان كتولي كفنان.
The beginning of that art is pigment making. From 5 pigments, Abdurrafia can produce hundreds of colors, and it's his favorite part of the process.
ما الديزاين تقدر دير أي ديزاين، ولكن خصك غير تحط عليه الألوان اللي كيناسبوه. كل لون يعطيك واحد 20 أو 30 لون. ملي كنخلطوهم كيعطيونا بزاف د الألوان، عدد الألوان.
He says the materials for some colors, like green and blue, are more expensive, so they increase the final price of a tile. Abdurrafia measures out each pigment and combines it with cement, marble powder, and water. Turning together a colorful glob of liquid cement. This mixture is what gives cement tiles their characteristic matte surface. A finished tile looks like one solid block, but it's actually layered. And artisans make each one upside down. The liquid cement goes first, filling in the gaps of this copper mold. More complicated designs, like those with lots of colors or really tight patterns, take longer to make, increasing the price per tile.
هذا ديزاين ضيق. شنو هو صعيب في الخدمة؟ هذا رقيق. هذا في الخدمة خصك كيطيح الثمن ديالو غالي شوية باش تصوبو.
When the design is simpler, artisans can produce twice as many tiles. They work quickly, but it takes a beginner a while to learn how to add the proper amount of cement. And the tool they use is surprisingly simple, just a funnel with a stick to control the flow. If too much or too little is added, or design is poured incorrectly, the tile is rejected.
هذه ما عندهاش هذا البياس اللي هنا ما كايناش هنا هذه كتقيل.
Depending on the design, artisans produce 50 to 90 tiles a day, enough to fill about 2 to 3 kitchen backsplashes. That's a much lower volume than ceramic tiles, where hundreds are fired together in large kilns. Cement tiles are made one at a time.
إذا درتي مثلا غير صباغة أكثر من صباغة، مثلا درتي الزرق أكثر من الأبيض، راه كتخرج لك لاطراس ديال الجليجة أو لا الزواقة ديال الجليجة كتخرج لك عوجة.
Once a design is poured, tile makers bury their art in a layer of sand and cement. While these experienced artisans don't often make a mistake, the manual nature of each step means that there's always the possibility of ruining a tile.
يعني باش تستمر في هذه الحرفة هذه هي الصعوبة اللي كتلاقى أنا بالنسبة لي أنا كصنايعي فيها. باش تستمر فيها وتبقى فيها وتعطي فيها وتبدع فيها، هذا هو اللي صعيب فيها. ملي كتكون صغير كتحفظ الصناعة بجميع المكونات ديالها، كتحفظها وتشربها. ابار ملي كتدخل كبير تقدر شي حوايج تعرفهم شي حوايج ما تعرفهمش، بزاف د الحوايج يعني غير غادي يكونوا مثلا فاتوك وانت عاد كتجي.
Once the parfait of cement is full and level, it's time to press. It's a crucial step that only takes a second.
يعني من تماك هذيك الطريصه هي واش كتلاقي لك السيمه مع الرمله مع الصباغه وشي كيدخل في شي وكالطريصه كتولي بحال الشكل ديال الحديد.
The design is absorbed into the tile, so it won't rub off or wear like a painted pattern. Healing up a tile looks easy, but right now it's soft and moist, like a cake. Poor handling or outright dropping would ruin it.
اول حاجه كتبدا في الصنعه كتبدا بجليجه يابسه وكدير ديك الحركه هذيك وتعلمها ومن ثم عاد كتمشي للجليجه عاد تصوبت خضراء مثلا فتيه حيت واحد عاد بدا ويجي ويهزها هكاك راه غتفرتت حيت كتكون مازال خضراء لواحد الدرجه ما تصورش.
It will take several days of drying before Abdurrafia can sell his tiles. Some workshops cover cement tiles in water and dry them for up to a month. But Abdurrafia's method, which he says uses less water, requires just a few spritzes before the tiles dry in the sun for up to 4 days. From this workshop, one tile costs $1.50 to $3, or about $50 to $70 per square meter.
حيت ثمن الجليج في الاول اول ما دخلنا حنا للصنعه كان ثمن الجليج ما كانش بحال هكا كان طايح بالنسبه للثمن ديالو كان كيتجاوز واحد ال5 ديال الدراهم او لا ولكن مع الوقت كي قلت لك الجليج غادي وكيتطور والصناعيه مثلا ديالنا حنا بداو كينقارضوا اول ثاني حاجه والمواد ديال باش كنخدموا بدات كترتفع حتى هي في الثمن هذا هو اللي جعل الثمن الجليج يطلع في الثمن.
That's because it's not just interior designers who want cement. The price is heavily tied to the volume of construction because it's used to make concrete. In the US, the producer price index for cement has more than tripled since 1990. Outside of recessions, the price of cement has typically gone up. Now supply chain disruptions and shortages are pressuring it even more. The COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's war in Ukraine slowed cement production and distribution. When construction demand rebounded, many builders said there wasn't enough for the projects they had planned. And in 2023, some countries experienced a double-digit % increase in cement prices. Despite the cost of materials and competition from cheaper tiles, Abdurrafia says the craft is growing.
بالنسبه للطلب ديال الكاروت السيما بالنسبه للطلب كاين طلب وكاين بزاف ديال الحوايج اللي لا بالنسبه للجوده اللي كنخدموا حنا كتجعل الطلب يكون ولا بالنسبه للديزاينات اللي عندنا حنا بالنسبه للديزاينات عندنا جدادين حتى هما كيجعلوا نقول لك من دابا واحد 30 عام لهنا تقريبا ولا كتزاد الصناعه ولات كتطور والعدد كيتزاد الحرفيين هو العصر الذهبي اللي كان لانه في واحد الفتره كانت تقدر تنقارض كاع.
After the tiles harden, workers ship them to customers all around the world. Abdurrafia says his sales are about half domestic, half international, catering to the growing demand for handmade tiles, which have become an increasingly common sight on Instagram and in interior design. Google Trends shows a steady climb in interest in the topic since 2011, and the market size could nearly double by 2032, according to Data Horizon Research.
More and more, I think people are drawn to things that have character. Everything went through a stage where everything was just like white and the interiors were very boring. There's an appreciation now for less synthetic, less mass manufactured things. But I don't think it's a trend because cement tile is actually a traditional tile method. Architecturally, I think they're timeless.
Kate co-founded Concrete Collaborative in 2004. Many of its designs are created by artists it partners with, like this one from designer Caroline Z. Hurley.
I like kind of playing with different textures, patterns, colors to see what we can create. And a lot of people really love the designers or artists that we'll collaborate with. They almost feel like they're getting a piece of Alex Proba's art by using her tile.
Kate says cement tiles are great for creating a bold design statement in your home. Thousands of miles away, her customers appreciate cement tiles for the same reason as Abdurrafia.
اول حاجه فكرت فيها منين صوبت داري فكرت في الصناعه ديالي نديرها في داري هذه اول حاجه بالعكس ما جانيش غالي لانه انا واخا يكون باي ثمن غنديرو بالعكس خصني نبقى انا خصني هذاك اللي كنخدم انا خصني نشوفو انا عندي في داري كنفتخر به واكثر من كنفتخر به يعني انا كنقول لك انا شي حاجه اللي عندي في قلبي بالنسبه لي انا الصناعه ديالي
Every single piece is made by hand, so it has a natural variation. It's perfectly imperfect.
Because cement tiles are handmade and can develop a patina, some customers worry that installing or maintaining them is difficult. But Kate says it's actually similar to any tile installation.
I'm gonna do this sample just to have an idea. So the way we're gonna use is doing like this, just to cover the whole area. And this is how this works. So you see, when you push it up and you hit with the hammer, this glue is really, really good. You can wait like 2 hours and it's gonna be dry, ready to add the grout.
After deciding on the spacing, he spreads out a glue and presses each tile into place.
First of all, what we did, we just measured the space we need and prepare all tiles. In this case, we use this kind of spacer, which is 3/16. We have to make sure everything going straight, has to be everything at the same spacer.
After cleaning off the grout, he waits for everything to dry, then seals the tiles once more.
Sometimes with synthetic finishes, it can make a space feel really cold. So the beauty of anything that has a little bit of life to it, that does patina over time, a lot of high-end clients really have an appreciation for that because they don't want their spaces to feel sterile. You know, something can last a really long time and have kind of like a life over time.
The fact that each tile isn't perfect is part of the charm. But it also means that the craft relies on the artisans who make each tile by hand. And not every workshop is as successful as Abdurafia's. Some artisans, like Syed Hussein in Egypt, worry they won't be able to pass on this tradition.
والله أنا بحس إن أنا راجل مميز، يعني على مستوى مصر كلها دلوقتي ما بقاش فيه صناعية، انقراض.
In the 1990s, competition from ceramic and marble tiles hurt his business. Now the raw materials are more expensive, and it's difficult to find workers. He's kept his workshop open by focusing on cheaper designs, but he's one of the few tile makers left in Egypt.
ممكن بإذن الله يعني الشغلانة دي تكمل معانا إن شاء الله، يعني قول 100 سنة اللي الصناعية هتشتغل فيها وهتبقى إن شاء الله كويسة.
Abdurafia is hopeful that in Morocco, the craft will continue to not only survive, but thrive.
هي اللي كتواجه هذا المهنة في المستقبل، وهي خص الناس يدعموها لأنها صنعة، ماشي زعما نقولوا صنعة وصافي ودايزة، لأن خص الناس يدعموها بالأفكار، يدعموها يوقفوا كما كنقولوا بزاف د الحوايج خصهم يوقفوا معاها باش تزدهر وتزيد. كما كانش مثلا نعطيك غير مثال، بعض الناس اللي كيغيروا على هذه الصنعه هذه واللي كيعطيو من جهدهم من المال ديالهم باش هذه الصنعه تبقى، كانت تقدر تنقرض. ومنهم الناس اللي عطاو من جهدهم ومن مالهم، هاد الناس هادو اللي كنخدم معاهم. يعني ماشي هو كنحسبوش عمل، وانما كنحسبوه هوايه، حب ديال الصنعه ديال اللي عندي في قلبي. وكما قلت لك ماشي مثلا انا عندي هاد الصنعه هذه كناخذ منها مثلا القوت ديالي او مصروفي، وانما هوايه كنبغيها كنحبها.